At UBC Solder, we don't just have mountain views. We have a global perspective, one that will teach you best practices, but more importantly, how to invent better ones. Because the world's greatest challenges need creative thinking, not convention. So if you think business needs a change, maybe the business world needs you. UBC Solder. Think outside. Visit solder.ubc.ca to learn more.
If you find this video helpful, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support will help keep this channel running. Alright everybody, let's discuss the Grid Layout Manager. So This places components in a grid of cells in a number of
That coffee smells good. Can you pass me the sugar when you're finished? Whoa, what are you doing? That's salt, not sugar. Let's get you another coffee.
Feeling distracted? You're not alone. Many Canadians are finding it hard to focus with mortgage payments on their minds. If you're struggling with your payments, speak to your bank. The earlier they understand your situation, the more options and relief measures could be available to you. Learn more at canada.ca/itpays-to-know. A message from the Government of Canada. rows and columns, with each component taking all of the available space within its cell, and each cell is the same size. So to begin, we'll need a frame. We're going to add buttons to our frame. The frame is going to have a
grid layout. So to create a frame, like always, we just say jframe, we give it a name like frame equals new jframe, frame.set default close operation, jframe exit on close, give it a size, the size doesn't matter, and frame.set visible to true. So let's create a whole bunch of buttons. I don't know how many, maybe 9. So to create a button, we just type in jbutton. We can give this a name like button1 equals new jbutton, and then when we instantiate this, we can set some text to the button, so let's just pass in 1. And then we can add this button to the frame. So frame dot add button 1. So there's a shortcut you can do that we learned in the last video on flow layout managers. This will still work, but just to save time, I'm going to shorten the lines of code that we have to write. So instead of creating a button with a name, we can create an anonymous button. So all we need to pass in when we add this component to the frame is instead a new jbutton, and then you can set the text right away too. The other way works just fine. That just requires more lines of code, but do what you prefer. I'm just shortening this to save some time for us. So we're going to add a bunch of buttons to the frame to demonstrate a grid layout. So I'm going to create 9 separate buttons. All of them will be numbered. And once you have a whole bunch of buttons, it doesn't matter how many, we're ready to move on. With frames, by default, they use a border layout manager, so the components like to take up as much room as possible. So with this button, this number 9 button, it's taking up the entire frame and all the other buttons are hidden underneath. So we need to change the layout manager that we're using for the containing class, which is our frame. So frame.set layout, and we're going to pass in a layout manager. Which layout manager? A new grid layout. well, because that's what we're learning about. And when we run this, all of these components all of these buttons are all arranged in one row and one column for each component that we have. But we can specify the amount of rows and columns that we want for this grid. We could say the first number is the amount of rows, and the second number is the amount of columns. So here we have 9 rows and 1 column. So they will all be stacked vertically like this, and then they will expand to fit the size of the frame. But all of the components will also stay the same size as each other. Let's say we want 3 rows and 3 columns. This is what this might look like. So we have 3 rows and 3 columns, and later on in this series we do create a calculator program as well as a game of tic-tac-toe, so a grid layout works perfect for those programs. Now when we create our instance of a grid layout, we can also add some arguments for the horizontal margins and vertical margins between these components. So let's add 2 more arguments, and we'll just set them to 0 for now. So this third position is the horizontal spacing between components, and the fourth one is the vertical spacing. So if I were to set this third argument to 10, we're going to have 10 pixels worth of margin between these components, between each column. And this fourth argument is the vertical margin. So if you combine these both together, you have 10 pixels worth of margin around all of the components. Now what happens if you have an uneven amount of components that you add to a grid layout? So we have 3 by 3, so that works perfect for 9 components. Let's say that we add 1 more. We're going to add a 10th button. Like that. So what happens now is that this will actually create a new column for us. So we have 3 rows and 4 columns, and it tries to make this as evenly balanced as possible. So that's the basics of grid layout managers. If you want a copy of all this code, I'll post all of this in the comments down below. But yeah, that's the basics of grid layouts.
Pluralsight Skill IQ is the most accurate and current way to gauge tech skills today. This isn't your average assessment.
In Java. Hey, how's it going everybody? It's your bro here, hope you're doing well, and in this video I'm going to teach you guys all about J-layered panes in Java, so you can do cool stuff like this, such as stack components on a GUI frame. So let's get into it. Before you reach the end of this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that we together can challenge and defeat the mighty YouTube algorithm. Hey everyone, I'm going to be teaching you guys about the J-layered pane, what this this is that this is a swing container that provides a third dimension for positioning components. So think of it like the depth or the Z index. So this is very similar to a J panel, except we can also specify different layers on the J layered pane. We can have components be stacked on top of one another or underneath. So let's begin by creating an instance of the J layered pane. So what we're going to do here is just type in J layered pane. We need a name for this pane, so we'll call this just layered pane with a lowercase l equals new J layered pane. Now we're also going to need a J-frame setup, and we've done this in previous videos, so if you need a J-frame, feel free to pause the video and type all of this in. So make sure that the layout manager is set to null. Now what we're going to do with this layered pane is actually add this to our J-frame, but first we're going to set the bounds for this. So we're going to type in the name of our J layered pane dot set bounds. And then I would recommend just picking the same dimensions for your J-frame, or you can pick a different size, but I think for this example we should have it be the same. So I'm going to set this where X is 0 and Y is 0, so this will begin in the top left corner. I want this to be 500 pixels for the width and 500 for the height. Now what we're going to do is actually add this layered pane to our J-frame, and I'll do that right underneath where we instantiate this J-frame. So frame.add layered pane. So now we have a layered pane attached to our J-frame, and now we can add components to our layered pane here. So let's take a look to see what we have so far. Here is our J-frame. It is 500 by 500, and there is an invisible layered pane attached to here. So we'll actually need to add some components so we can see this in action. So we'll need to add some, maybe J-labels or some other components to this. I like J-labels, so let's add those. So J-label, and we'll call this label, label1, equals new J-label. And we're going to take label1 and set this to opaque. Set opaque true so we can actually see this. And let's add a background color, so label1 dot set background, and then we'll place the words color dot red. And since we're not using a layout manager, we're going to set the bounds for this label on our layered pane. So label1 dot set bounds, and we'll have this label begin where X is 50, Y is 50, and for the dimensions, this will be 200 by 200. All right, so let's do the same thing, and we can just copy the these and make maybe 2 more labels. So we'll have label 1, label 2, and label 3. But make sure to change it here as well, so you'll want these also to be their respective labels. So label 2 for this paragraph here, and then label 3 for everything here. Let's change the second label to be maybe green, the third one to maybe blue, and we'll also change the bounds. So I'll have this second one begin where X is 100 and Y is 100. And then for label 3, I'll have this begin where X is 150 and Y is 150. So what we need to do next is actually add all of these labels to our layered pane. So let's do that after we instantiate our layered pane. So we can add that right here. So type in the name of your layered pane, dot, add, and the name of the component that you want to add. So let's add label 1. And let's do the same thing for each of these components. So do the same thing for label 2 and label 3. So let's run this and see what we have so far. Now label 1 is our red box, so the first component by default that is added to your layered pane will appear on the top, the next one will be underneath, and so on and so forth with that pattern. So we can actually change the order in which these are stacked on top of each other, and with layered panes, there's actually a name for each layer. Here's a visual. Alright everyone, well here's a visual of all the layers within a J layered pane. So each of these layers actually has a specific name, and you can specify which layer in which you want to add a component. And when these are all stacked on top of each other, it adds some depth to a program. So it appears that visuals are stacked on top of each other. Now you don't have to remember all these names, there's actually a shortcut I'm going to show you guys in just a moment. But let's begin just by adding 2 components to our default layer, and maybe 1 to our drag layer. So let's head back to our program and try that. So with label 1 and label 2, what we're going to do is that if we want to add this to the bottom layer, which is the drag layer, we're going to add the component followed by a comma, then type in J layered pane dot
more festive, less frantic. Get deals for every occasion with DoorDash.
You can actually pick the layers from here. So the bottom one was default. So let's see if we can find that default layer. So let's copy. Copy this and add this to label 2. Then let's take label 3 and add this to the top layer, which was drag. So I have an extra comma there. Let me fix that. Okay, so that was drag layer, which is right here. So when we run this, the blue box is actually going to appear at the top, and the rest are at the bottom. So there's actually a shortcut for this because, let's be honest, we're not going to remember all the different layer names and their order. So what we can do in place of typing JLayered pane dot then pick a layer, what you can do is just add a number, and there's an associated number with each layer. Let's say we want the base layer, that is 0. But we need to do one more thing just besides place a number here. We need to use the wrapper class. So type in integer dot value of, and then place the layer number. So if we want this at the bottom, we can just place layer 0. So just type in number 0. And let's add label 3 on top of that. So we can just copy this and say integer dot value of 1. And then let's place the green box at the very top. So we'll say integer dot value of 2. You could also pick a higher number here as well. So what ends up happening now is that our green box is at the very top, so the higher the number, the higher the placement is when you stack these on top of each other. So that's really the basics of J-layered panes. You add components to a J-layered pane, specify the layered number or by name, and then add the layered pane to your frame or other container. So if you'd like a copy of all this code, I'll post this in the comments down below. And well, yeah, that's the basics of using J-layered panes in Java.
This is Amazon's new money-making app. Let me show you how it works. That app is called Audible.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's your